Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you here to our Town Council meeting of April 3rd. And if you would, Rebecca, would you please call roll?
Councilmember Andrews.
Here.
Councilmember Bailey. Councilmember Ravazio.
Here.
Vice Mayor First.
Here.
Mayor Condon.
Here. Thank you. And now if you'll all stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now we move right along to open time. That's for anyone here that has something that they would like to say that is not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to say anything? Okay, seeing none, we'll move right along to the presentations. And tonight we have Diane Steinhauser. Welcome, Diane. To make a report on the Transportation Authority of Marin and the renewing of the transportation sales tax.
Thank you. You are stronger than you look. Okay. Good evening. Mayor Condon, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to come this evening. I was here, and some members of my team, a year ago. We had originally been out in Marin meeting with councils to talk about raising the sales tax cap, having a set-aside amount for transportation in order to raise the sales tax for transportation. We currently have a half-cent transportation sales tax. We were looking about a year and 2 months ago on whether we should raise the sales tax to fund several new elements of need. I'm pleased to report that we reset. We're not here to talk about raising the sales tax for transportation, but we are talking about renewing it. And I'm going to talk a little bit later in the presentation about why we want to do that early. We have a number of questions for you this evening. This is a discussion item, so we're looking for input. So please feel free to ask anything, recommend anything. We're going to talk about the renewal plan, what's in it. Did we get it right? We'd love to hear if there's things we're missing or things you would like to see emphasized. Is there anyone we should be talking to in your community? We're doing outreach over the next several months. And then finally, what has been your experience with the existing taxes? Is there things that you'd like to see adjusted or changed? We want to start out a little bit about talking about local funds. This is not unusual for other counties in the state. I was at a meeting about 2 weeks ago in Orange County that had a very similar percentage. Local funds for transportation, this is our fiscal year 14-15 snapshot, pretty much the same up through last year, 16-17. It represents about 72% of the funds we get. Now, 30 years ago, federal and state funds made up the majority of the funds received, but they've diminished in value, and they also have not kept up with new needs, both increased needs and the diminished value of not raising either the federal or state taxes or revenues to cover transportation. So similar on a regional level, the 9-county area will show about 71% of funds being local. Our sources of local funds are our vehicle registration fee, $10, passed by voters in 2010, and this transportation sales tax, 0.5%, passed by voters in 2004 at about, I think the vote was 70.4% approval. This is our existing program. It funds local bus transit. It funded the HOV gap closure, which was the major highway improvement through San Rafael, about a 3.2 mile gap in the HOV lane. It funds local streets and roads, and it funds school safety and access, which is primarily our safe routes to school program. There's 24 counties in the state that have local sales taxes for transportation, starting with Santa Clara in 1984. Currently, our transportation sales tax gains us about $25 million a year in revenue. We get about $2 million from federal sources and about $1.5 from state sources. The regional component here is regional toll funds. I'm going to talk about that a little later also. Why do we want to renew now? There's a couple of primary reasons. One is that there are elements in our sales tax now that we are not authorized to spend funding on. We're not authorized to spend funding on interchange improvements. We're not authorized to spend funding on sea level rise and resiliency or support to employers and employees, commute alternative programs. We're not authorized to spend money on the connector in San Rafael, which has funds in the renewed measure from northbound 101 to eastbound 580. And we're not authorized to spend funds on the Narrows, which we would like to complete. We've made a lot of progress, but we have a little more work to do on the Narrows. We formed a expenditure plan advisory committee, and they took a look at the poll that we conducted. We conducted a poll in May of 2017. We repeated it in January of 2018. So this was about 2 months ago. So the poll asked the public, what would you like to see funds spent on? And these were the top vote getters: congestion on 101, potholes, intersections in terms of relieving congestion on local streets, funds for the 101-580 connector, options to getting to and from work, interchanges. Interestingly, flooding and sea level rise were of concern to the public, and then local transit, including seniors and those with disabilities. Down the list towards the bottom in terms of public perception and support was, interestingly, gaps in pedestrian pathways, maintaining and expanding crossing guards and other safe routes to school elements, support incentives for electric vehicles, including charging facilities, and finally, critical gaps in bike paths. We've done a lot of investment in Marin in major bike path facilities for many years, and you can kind of see by the public's interest that they believe that funds might need to be spent in other areas. We read them a 75-word ballot question. You can see it there on the right. We got a 77.9% approval on renewing the sales tax for 30 years with citizens' oversight. We then read 9 oppositional statements. Our pollster tells us he usually only reads 4 or 5 oppositional statements. We read 9 to the person taking the poll on the phone, including the state increasing gas taxes and VRF fees. Government managed its funds better and controlled pensions. We wouldn't be in this situation of needing more money. State and local taxes aren't deductible under the new federal tax law. Now, we know that's might have changed a bit, but this was December when we put this together. Marin County has approved measures for transportation, smart parks. We don't need to keep this up. The measure is growth-inducing and will increase pressure by the state to build more low-income housing. And then finally, sales taxes are regressive. They tend to hurt the lower income and senior population more. After all that, we dropped to 73.2%. So yeah, the oppositional statements had an impact. The pollster's recommendation to the TAM board was you will need an education campaign. But even at 73.2, with a 67 and you need a 66 and 2/3 approval at 67%. You're starting out at a pretty good point. With 77.9 dropping to 73.2. We formed an expenditure plan advisory committee. That committee met 24 members of the community. They met 9 times between June and November. They received a lot of education, including why do we need to do this? We have SB 1 and we have RM 3. SB 1 is the Road Repair and Accountability Act. It covers state highway and local road repair with some funds to transit. That's about 80% of SB 1. They also talked about RM3 on the ballot on June 5th. Voters here and in all the 9 counties are going to be asked to increase tolls on the 7 state-owned toll bridges, not the Golden Gate Bridge. That's handled with a separate government structure. the Golden Gate Bridge District. But on the toll bridges in the Bay Area, the tolls would go up $1 in 2019, another dollar in 2022, and a third dollar in 2025. Regional Measure 3 funds a couple major projects in Marin. It gives us money for that connector from northbound 101 to eastbound 580. It funds a new Bettini Transit Center in San Rafael. It funds the Narrows, substantial funding, and it also begins funding improvements on Highway 37. So those are the big improvements in RM3. The amount of funds needed for those mega projects, I don't think we could come forward with a renewal if we didn't have the backup of these other large funding sources to rely on. And I'll talk a little bit more about some funds in those projects that we do have in the measure and why. The EPAC's recommendations are for a 30-year extension. Now, our sales tax would have expired in 24-25 since we'd be renewing and it would go into effect in January of 19. Due to that overlap, the tax will be continued for 24 years after its original expiration. But it is a 30-year sales tax extension of the half cent. And the Expenditure Plan Committee recognized this need to fund a number of new programs and projects as soon as possible. And I'm going to talk about those in a second. I do want to point out that the public also in the poll was asked, what is important to you with respect to having local funds? And these are the things that resonated most strongly with them, that every penny will benefit local transportation here in Marin with funds that can't be taken away by the state. The measure will address urgent transportation needs, but will not increase taxes, including congestion relief. And the measure will allow Marin to receive millions of dollars in state and regional matching funds, which all of these were looked at as very strong elements for support by the public. The sales tax measure maintains the same core structure with a few changes within these categories that I want to talk about now. The 7.5% that had gone towards building the highway project through San Rafael, which was carpool lanes and a bike ped path, will now be matching funds for the Marin-Sonoma Narrows and the direct connector from northbound 101 to eastbound 580. I can't emphasize enough the importance of matching funds. The Marin-Sonoma Narrows funding is for the capital construction, and I have not been able to find enough money to complete the design, the right-of-way activity, and the permits. So these funds will get me ready to receive funds from either the state or the regional toll if approved. The same is true on the direct connector from 101 to 580. It pays to have some local funds to get started on the project, to do the design and environmental, to build in local features to the project. This category will also create a new program for 6 local interchanges. These are the ones that so far have been named in our presentations. Tiburon-East Blythedale, Paradise, Tamalpais, San Rafael's North San Pedro, Freitas, Smith Branch Road. We got a request from Novato last week at their council to add San Marin Drive and Atherton Ave up in Novato. And finally, it provides new dedicated funding for what we call demand management. These are commute alternatives programs, such as emergency ride home for people that take transit, such as car share, bike share. We have a Lyft program. We're very proud of a program we developed with Lyft to give people subsidized rides to and from smart stations and other transit facilities. That's what the new demand management funding would go towards. Please note that the Tamalpais Drive Paradise interchange has a prominent place on that list. Now, there isn't enough funding. This is a renewal. We're not creating a huge new pot. We're moving some funds around. We're capturing some new needs. What we would do with the funding for the interchanges is get them ready. We would do planning. We would do design, community outreach. We would probably get the projects shelf ready and maybe peel off small phases that we could fund with these funds. But with so many interchanges in need of work, we definitely would not have enough money to rebuild all of those interchanges that we're showing. But we'll explain in our sales tax plan how this will enable us to get those interchange projects ready for other fund sources. Local streets and roads, we're going to combine our major road and local road category and to give more funds to our local DPW directors. You get about 13% now. You'll end up getting 22%. I'll show you that in a second in terms of how many dollars. We are going to allow existing major road projects currently underway to be completed, and those include Sir Francis Drake from 101 to the Ross Town limit, 3rd Street and San Rafael Novato Boulevard up north in Novato, and then Tiburon East Blythedale down here in Mill Valley. Right now, you receive about $112,000 annually from the measure. You would receive $186,000. So you got almost a 50% increase in the funds that would come directly to the town for you to decide on how to spend. You've received about $1.1 million to date. Third category is our school safety, Safe Routes to School program. We're increasing funding for education and encouragement, for crossing guards, and for safe pathways, including a new funding category for small, quick fix type projects around schools. We've been very successful in terms of crosswalks and other things that we can do to address safety in crossing some of our busy streets. Key projects that have been funded out of Safe Pathways, here's a short list of them here. You can see the funds that we've been able to dedicate to projects in Corte Madera and some pictures of those projects. Right now you have 7 crossing guards covering the Larkspur Corte Madera School District. I do want to mention that we directed a big chunk of our Safe Routes funding that we get from the federal fund sources to the project on Paradise Drive, which we believed was, and we learned in working closely with your staff, was an important access project for Cove School. And then additional infrastructure improvements have also been funded in our Safe Routes to School program. I'm now going to introduce Robert Betts. He's here from Marin Transit. 55% of the funding currently and in the future will go to transit. It's a very important source of funds, and he's going to talk a little bit about what is funded now in transit in Corte Madera.
Thank you, Diane. Good evening, Council. Robert Betts, Director of Planning and Operations, Marin Transit, here to talk a little bit about how the 55% is spent today and to really emphasize how fortunate we are at the local transit district that the Measure A funds are in place. It really allows us to do a lot more than just the traditional local bus service, but also expand to do a lot more or be a lot more active in home-to-school transportation and partnerships with our school districts, as well as senior and ADA programs across the county. Looking back to 2004, right before Measure A, the original Measure A was passed. At the time, local transit service was looking at doing some significant cuts in service. Fortunately, after the sales tax was passed, we were provided the stable funding source, and since that time, we have more than doubled the local service here in Marin County. About 3.3 million passenger trips occur on all of our services every year, and that expansion has not just been focused on the local bus service, but we've also been able to expand our senior ADA programs, expand our K through 12 home to school programs, and also expand our what we call our rural and recreational services into West Marin and our Muirwood shuttle program. Talking specifically about the fixed route transit service here in Corte Madera, along the 101 north-south, there is an abundance of transit service. Every 15 minutes, 7 days a week, you have service that serves all the bus pads. That's provided as a combination of local service, Route 17 and Route 36, which operate every half an hour, and they're offset from each other, as well as the regional Golden Gate services that provide service and connectivity down into San Francisco. Locally here in Corte Madera, we have Route 22, which operates through downtown Larkspur and comes in along Magnolia and Tamalpais. That route connects back north to College of Marin, into downtown San Anselmo, and ultimately to the transit center to the north. And going south, it connects down to Strawberry Village and ultimately down to Marin City. Within the town of Corte Madera specifically, about 300 passenger trips are made every day. That 300 trips excludes all the regional service, so riders using the Golden Gate services into the city, and all the home-to-school transportation services here in Corte Madera. So talking specifically about the student transportation services in Corte Madera, countywide, about 25% of all the local riders are under the age of 18, and that percentage is quite a bit higher here in Corte Madera. We offer transit routes that are scheduled to meet the bell times at Hall Middle School, and in partnership with the Tiburon Peninsula JPA, we also support the Cove School, the yellow bus service that's set up to serve the Cove School. Redwood High School is well served from the Tiburon Peninsula and coming in from East Corte Madera, and about 250 trips per day occur on those routes. Those routes are actually experiencing overcrowding, and we've just made an investment in new equipment that'll go into service next year to help alleviate some of that overcrowding. We do offer what we call our Youth Pass program, which is a pass that K through 12 students are eligible for that gives them unlimited access to the fixed route network. That pass is available for $325 per year. Within the Corte Madera schools, we had about 230 of those passes that were distributed last year. And as I mentioned, over at the Cove School, and thanks in part to contribution from the town, Yellow Bus service was expanded to serve Cove School. That program is done in partnership with the Reed Unified School District and the towns of Tiburon and Belvedere. That one route has proved to be quite successful this year, and 126 one-way passes have been distributed for that service. Senior and ADA transportation here in Marin County, as we all know, the county is aging, and the aging population is continuing to be healthy and active, and as that population has aged, transportation needs have increased. Within Marin County and here in Corte Madera, we provide a number of services. The first is what we call ADA paratransit service. This is a curb-to-curb service that is available to those who are unable to use the fixed route bus service. We contract with Whistle Stop Wheels to provide that service. Here in Corte Madera, more than 4,000 paratransit trips alone were taken last year. We also have a taxi subsidy program. We call it Catch a Ride, and eligible riders qualify for up to 8 one-way taxi rides per month. And again, specifically here in Corte Madera, we had 1,300 trips that were taken on that program last year. We also coordinate countywide volunteer driver programs that allows drivers to reimburse their riders on a per-mile basis. And lastly, we fund the one-call, one-click travel counseling and referral service that we call Travel Navigators. All of these services are dependent in part or in whole by Measure A. So with that, I'll turn it back to Diane.
I did want to mention another recommendation from the Expenditure Plan Committee, which resonated with some of the councils that we've spoken with, which is that transportation is changing. And there's a lot on the horizon that kind of indicates we may need to take another look at how we spend these funds. So what the Expenditure Plan Committee is recommending, and it seems to be resonating well with the TAM board members we've spoken to and the councils, is that we would give the TAM board an opportunity, at maybe a minimum of 7 years, no longer than 10 years, to do a very careful review of the plan. So are we spending money the right way? Are there other demands that we need to meet? Is there new technology we need to consider? There would be a very careful process that would be laid out in terms of approval. It would be a supermajority of cities and citizens and the Board of Supervisors and a public process if we were to amend the plan. So I want to make sure I mention that we're not going to be locked into 30 years with these very specific funds. Although we do want to assure the public how the money is being spent. So we have a lot of detail that's going to go into the final expenditure plan. Where we're at right now is we're completing presentations to councils like yours, asking for input. Then we're going to go to the TAM board in late April, maybe early May, on adoption of an expenditure plan. We'll be back to all 11 cities and towns and the Board of Supervisors for approval of the expenditure plan. So this is the first time we'll be here. And then by the end of July, we hope that we'll get approval from the TAM board, who will request the Board of Supervisors to put this on the ballot. And we're shooting for November of 2018. I'm going to stop and see if we can answer any questions you might have, or make sure we take notes on things that you would like us to consider.
Thanks, Diane. From the council, are there any questions for Diane?
I had a question, and I don't know if this is for Diane or maybe regarding the Marin Transit, because my question is about the yellow bus. There is a lot of interest in the yellow bus program throughout Marin, and I've heard quite a bit from parents here in Corte Madera. At one point, there was some concern about whether or not Marin Transit would possibly terminate the Hall Middle School bus and whether maybe a yellow bus program could be there. But I'm sure there would be interest in yellow bus maybe to Neil Cummins. Anyway, what does that program look like in the future? Is there opportunity for expansion? How do you anticipate those funds might be spent?
I'm going to let Robert answer
Okay.
in detail. The one thing I do want to say is one of the challenges we're facing is we're renewing the existing tax.
Right.
So early on, we thought, let's put more money into roads and school bus service and other things, but it didn't resonate well with the public, any increases in tax. So we're having to work within our means, and with that in mind, I'll let Robert talk a little bit more about yellow school bus.
Yeah, thanks. And as I mentioned, Measure A really gives us the ability to be very active as a local transit agency in both planning and operating yellow school bus service. We are, to my knowledge, and I was just on a national conference call, the only public transit agency that is directly overseeing yellow school bus service. This has traditionally been something that the school districts have been the lead on as a way to get their students to school. But here in Marin County, yellow bus is used not just to get students to school, but also to relieve congestion, and we've seen great success with that in some of our communities. I guess almost 3 years ago now, in partnership with TAM and the Marin County Office of Education, we led a coordinated countywide school transportation study. We recognized the needs of home-to-school transportation was increasing, and we really wanted to have a nice blueprint for how we were going to address those emerging needs. Big takeaways from the study. The first was a recommendation that K through 8 students should really be transported to school in yellow school bus service. And I can go into a number of different reasons why, but high school students are much more appropriate market for transit services. As you know, our transit services need to be open to the public. Transit services operate on a schedule, and they're typically concentrated along main arterials where we expect students to be able to walk to, or all of our riders to be able to walk to and from those services. So we've taken that blueprint, and we've slowly started to implement some of those recommendations. The Cove School was part of that recommendation. We were able to work with Reed and actually identify an opportunity to reuse some of their buses to expand yellow bus service at a very marginal cost. That allowed us to reinvest the historic public transit services we were offering to Cove School to other high schools around the county. Quite honestly, our biggest limitation right now to expanding those programs are getting vendors, because we contract out for service, to come into Marin County and do the work. Marin Transit does not own our own facility, which makes it very challenging for these yellow bus providers to expand here in Marin County. We just went out to bid for the second time in the last 3 years. The first time we went out to bid, we had 0 bidders. The second time, we had 1. So it's been very challenging to get bidders to come into Marin County. Lack of facility is number 1, labor shortage is the other. So we are trying to overcome those hurdles and looking at investments that would allow vendors to make it more feasible to operate the service here in Marin County, but that's kind of the environment right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that's kind of a disconcerting proposition there. Oh, yes, Jim.
When you say facility, define what you mean by that.
Yeah, so when I say facility, it's somewhere that our contractors can maintain and store the vehicles. So we have been able to piece together a workable solution right now. So the county of Marin is actually allowing us to do just parking of the vehicles used to support most of the yellow bus services here in southern Marin. They still get maintained at facilities in Vallejo and Richmond, but even having that parking here first improves our reliability and makes it a little bit more feasible for the services to be delivered here in Marin County.
Thank you. Bob, any questions?
Yeah, on the poll that was conducted about the priorities, what was the methodology for that? How was that conducted?
Yeah, we actually hired a professional polling vendor, Brian Godby Associates. They did a combination of phone, which was the least number of contributing answers to the 794, cell phone, email-based, and texting to prompt people to take the email-based poll. We contracted for 600. We're finding that because of the willingness of people to respond to emails and do the polling by email, we end up with more. So we ended up with a sample of 794 likely voters in 2018. These are the results that came from the poll.
Okay, so that avoids duplication of respondents.
Correct.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from our audience? Mr. Kuhnhart?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. A little bit of what I'm going to say repeats what Vice Mayor first heard at the TAM meeting, but fortunately, this presentation, the excellent presentation by Diane and Robert today, is a lot richer in terms of local impacts, but some of the same points obtain. And Diane has heard from a number of environmental organizations, for which I have been one of the speakers, saying the future is in electric vehicles. And I want to pick up on something that Diana, I think, very appropriately said. Transportation is changing, and we need a flexible plan. What some of us would advocate right now is, if you could go to slide 15, approximately, it's about 3 after this one, I think. It's this slide here, for 1 second. Oh, I can do that? Oh, wow. Power, that's real power right there. Something like that one. I believe that the key place to get some additional funds for electric vehicle infrastructure would be within that 26.5%. Partly because of something that's going to be later on your agenda tonight, which is SB1. And if SB1 is going to bring in $1.1 million a year in local road improvements that's not been there before, repairs to infrastructure and improvements, we have a lifting of the ceiling and perhaps room for additional flexibility. I believe that the advisory committee has already put in place within that 26.5% or 1% for sea level rise and similar. And some of us would suggest that we add about 2% to that one for a total of 3%, so that there can be a flexible plan assisting, making small targeted assistance for electric vehicle charging, not paying for the whole thing, because there are private providers who can make some money on the charger itself, but helping with infrastructure and public property, and particular town property, but also large public properties like the malls and so forth, because it's the infrastructure that's the important thing. But you can benefit from public-private partnerships, and I can give you a couple of examples of that if you want. But I think that this is the time, as was pointed out in Diane's laying out of the whole agenda of what is the timeline. This is the time to raise the questions and bring additional ideas into place that will help with addressing the flexible that's going to come in our transportation of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else from the audience? I just wanted to make a couple of remarks. I was really happy to see how many rides are being used by, or given by Catch a Ride and the other resources for seniors. That's really terrific. And I know, as far as being the liaison to Age Friendly, that age-friendly Corte Madera has made an effort too to publicize those different resources to our local seniors. The other comment that I wanted to make, which was one of concern, not at all about TAM. In fact, it's really good to see that every 15 minutes we have transportation buses coming along at stopping at the Paradise bus pad. However, I was curious. That's exactly the period of time that the Bill 827 is zeroing in on. If you've got some sort of transportation coming along there, if 827, which is the one that allows for expansion, that if that impacts us at all, the fact that we are so well served that we become a target to 827. I don't know if that has even occurred or.
You know, the TAM board is not taking up SB 827. We're not in the land use business. You are. I could probably provide some information to your public works and city manager on what we're able to dig up on the parameters that are contained within 827. We're not sure 827 is going to go anywhere. I mean, it's an interesting kind of bookend proposal for discussions, and we know that the regional agencies, MTC and ABAG, are very concerned about housing. So they're trying to find a way to help address the housing need in the Bay Area. But TAM is not directly involved in this at all.
Okay, but
Yeah.
I would appreciate if you could
We'll see what we can find
give
out.
any information you can to our
Yep.
DPW director. Great. Any other comments? Yes.
Yes, Diane, I'm wondering if I could ask you to kind of follow up and respond to what David Kuhnhart asked about. Specifically, I'm curious about electric vehicles and the various sources of funding. I know there's some from other agencies, state and federal. I know TAM has offered rebates for municipal fleet and agency fleets that kind of received some lackluster response, so we have some funds left over in there. So, anyway, would you mind?
You bet. This is a question that's come up at councils around Marin. We currently have a program under our $10 vehicle registration fee. This year, our budget is $240,000, and we're going to spend it all. This is the governance in the EV world. Pretty simply, residential, commercial, public infrastructure, public fleets, and vehicle choice. Where TAM decided way back in a policy document we developed in 2011 is that we're going to look at public funds being spent for publicly available infrastructure or for public fleets or public transit vehicles, not commercial private business parking, not private residential. Could we go there? We could, but that's something the TAM board's going to have to consider. Back in 2011, there was one big grant that kind of spurred us to consider funding electric vehicles out of the VRF, which was called AB 118. We established, I think, 17 charging points in Marin that were publicly available from that grant. We needed matching funds. So the VRF provided a source of matching funds. In this same plan that we developed back in 2011, we had 3 deliverables. One was education on electric vehicles and their availability. And we've done a lot of outreach and education, both with local jurisdictions and the public, with the funding from the VRF. Principles and priorities. And as I said, we kind of took public infrastructure, publicly available, as well as public fleets and transit, and then a countywide plan for siting and placing of EV infrastructure. So we had kind of, with all of our support from various agencies at the time, we were hoping in a 1 to 5 year period to install 176 charging points back in 2011. I'm pleased to report, with a couple of big efforts that we're going to be doing over the next year, we'll be at about 205 publicly available charging points in Marin. Now, are they everywhere where people want them to be? Probably not. So could we do more? We probably could. I think the question for the TAM board is going to be, what do you want to take funds from in order to fund more electric vehicle chargers? In some way, the Measure program is a core program that maintains a number of things that we already do. The electric vehicle infrastructure is a changing program. We've got a whole suite of agencies that offer grants and funds for chargers. We've got a whole suite of funds for vehicle rebates. We know Marin Clean Energy is considering a potential vehicle rebate. So we've got a world that's grown, and what should be the public agency funding role. We do know that we may want to expand into the kind of the public-private space, such as a mall. Can we put more chargers into malls where people go? And could we possibly expect the mall owner to allow free power for a period of time to return the investment to the public? Because this is private property. So we've been very cognizant about private investment with public funds. So we're not exactly sure where we're going to end up on this. But we do have another funding program. We have unspent money in that program. And I would venture that the TAM board would like to use the unspent money in that $10 vehicle registration fee program first. And let's put more money on the table. Let's see if we can draw more interest in fleet vehicles, chargers at malls, as well as other publicly available chargers. And I think that's going to be a first step that TAM board's likely to consider. I'm not sure that the idea of moving money out of local streets and roads, when that's just such a important point with the public in the poll that we took, I am not sure the TAM board is going to be doing that. So,
Jim?
Yeah, I have a question about the local streets and roads money. How restricted is that? Or will the town have some flexibility? For example, if we wanted to put in charging stations, and basically say, okay, local jurisdiction, what are your needs? Or if we needed to subsidize the yellow bus program.
we would absolutely support use of the local street and road money for electric charging facilities or any other alternative fuel facility that may come along. School bus service, we'd have to think about that. I'm not sure we would be against it. Let us put a little thought into that. We'll take that back as a comment. But in local streets and roads, in sea level rise resiliency, in transit capital, in innovation, we want to make sure electric vehicles have a presence. So if you choose to spend the money there, we are good with that. The local streets and roads category is golden. You send me a bill on June 15th and say, here I'm going to spend $186,000, and we write you a check. And yes, and everyone else does also. And you can spend it on a whole variety of needs, whatever you believe is most important. You know, whether it's matching, whether it's new technology, we're very, very flexible on local streets and roads. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anything else?
Madam Mayor, if I may, just a couple of quick comments from the Public Works Department. Peter Brown here. So first of all, thank you to Ms. Steinhauser and Mr. Betts for coming in. This is a rich information for us all. I think this will be an important measure countywide. From the Public Works standpoint, the thing that I think we should emphasize the most, to be honest with you all, is that 7-year revisit. So, you know, I appreciate Ms. Steinhauser's comment on acknowledging that we are in a transition period in the transportation system. We haven't even mentioned autonomous vehicles or their penetration rate. Of course, notwithstanding Elon Musk's tweet or Uber's permits being pulled for testing, in the near term, those will be big changes. And so, you know, and I appreciate Ms. Steinhauser's comments that her board is considering and it's resonating, this need to revisit. I don't think that in 2050 we know what transportation is going to be like in a 30-year measure. So the thing that I'm most concerned about would be locking ourselves into funding percentages and pie allocations of this nature for the long term. So your council should consider continuing to give that direction to the TAM board to the extent possible so that we have the flexibility we need going forward.
Thanks, Peter. Diane, thank you so, okay. Karen? Yes. Yeah. Okay, one more. Karen Gerbosi?
Karen Gerbosi, 111 Parkview Circle. As a member of a Citizens Oversight Committee, my question has to do with, you said that there's an oversight committee?
Correct.
And so are there existing reports that are available?
Yes, there are. In fact, we put some out on the.
Those are from the oversight committee?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And we have openings, and please keep an eye on our website.
I welcome new members.
Karen serves on the oversight committee for our tax.
Oh, well,
so
that's
don't
probably
steal her away.
a little conflict of interest there.
Oh.
I wanted to end with acknowledging and thanking you for all your years of service. I was here many years ago, and we had a packed room talking about some controversial stuff, and we got through it, and we're all better for it, and I appreciate your attention to transportation. I wish especially well Mayor Condon and Vice Mayor First. I will miss you, and thank you very much for all of your work.
Oh, Diane,
So-
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Too, for all you do. Thank you. And Robert, thank you too for your
Thanks.
report. We're in good hands when it comes to transportation. Okay, and we'll move along. Now we have a presentation from our Central Marin Police Authority. This is the annual report, and we have Chief Norton first.
All right. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Hopefully you're all really excited to hear some statistics.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We're going to try and keep it somewhat brief for you. But at the same time, before I bring up Captain Khalili and Lieutenant Maneras, I just wanted to thank them. They did a lot of hard work putting this together. We do this every year, but it's a pain for the ones who actually are putting it together, just to be honest with you. And just a little bit of quick background before I bring them up here. And when they come up and they're presenting, I think it works best if a question strikes you, just go ahead and interrupt, and let's do it that way. And if you want to heckle them, whatever, I'm sure they won't mind too much. But one thing is, this year's statistics is kind of our first time using some new software from when we went with the sheriff for our dispatching services. And I think this year's statistics are probably the most accurate we've had in several years, so that's good. And I don't know if you remember that from the last time, but at least our crime statistics, I think, are definitely more accurate. And I did want to point out one thing is when they worked on this and kind of showed it to me, I almost looked at it initially with one eye closed. I was a little nervous because I think most of you know, but the last year and a half or so, we've had a lot of turnover at our department. And we've actually had about 25% of our officers are brand new now. And I was like, oh, we lost a lot of experience. There's a lot of training, a lot of downtime. How did that affect our crime, our traffic stops, and all that? And I was actually really pleasantly surprised. And I think it goes to our trainers, but also our new officers just having a really good drive and putting in a lot of hard work to get the numbers where they are. So without further ado, come on up.
Okay, great.
Thank
Good
you.
evening.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, what we're going to go through is the similar format as we've done in years past. I'm going to inundate you with a bunch of stats, and with council's approval, what I'd like to do is just kind of skip over Larkspur and San Anselmo's heat maps and focus on Corte Madera. So for the first slide here, what we're looking at is total calls for service, and as you can see, Central Marin Police Authority in 2017 responded to 39,425 calls for service. That's a huge number of calls for service in total, but that's 39,425 opportunities for us to make a mistake and land on national television, and we don't. So we're doing things right. On the top corner there, it's broken down by the days of the week, the time of days, and then the calls for service per month. But most importantly is the allocation there, where Corte Madera's share was 10,667 calls for service out of that total 39,000. That is an increase of about, believe it or not, about 75 calls for service total. So in 2016, there was 39,344.
So we aren't keeping up with our competing jurisdictions.
No. This next slide basically breaks down the top 10 locations for those calls for service, and surprise, surprise, I should say not a surprise, the shopping centers account for most of those call volumes, only in that there's a lot of people, and where there's a lot of people, there's a lot of calls for service. And this has been a trend that's been happening for this the last several years. On the bottom, the top 10 calls for service types. At the very top is the extra patrol requests. And what that is a citizen will call and say, hey, my neighborhood, we've experienced some auto burglaries or theft from vehicles. Can you guys provide some extra patrols? But really, those extra patrol requests are surrounding the shopping center. So rather than allocate our resources to areas that are not in need, we allocate those resources to the shopping centers to prevent crime. For Corte Madera, this is it's a heat map, and it basically takes the call volumes for the town of Corte Madera, and it generates a heat map. And I don't know if everyone can see, but the heat map really centers around the village and town center. That's where the most call volumes for the town occur. As you can see, the top 5 calls for service, again, for the town of Corte Madera is the extra patrols. And what I'll show you in just a few slides here is what we've been experiencing is high numbers of thefts around the shopping centers. And so we allocate our officers to provide extra patrols. Traffic stops, and then assist fire. Assist fire is pretty high for the town just because of, that could be lift assists, medical aid responses that we assist the fire department with. This slide here, now we're going to shift from calls for service to actual reports that are taken by the officers. And in 2017, as you can see, we took 2,783 reports, and that's just a very, very small increase from the year prior. And 964 of those reports were in Corte Madera. And again, most of these, as you'll see in the next few slides, are focused around the shopping center areas. I'm going to focus on this slide here for just a moment. This encapsulates all the crime reports that we've taken as Central Marin. And they're broken down by the individual city and towns. As you can see, we, believe it or not, had our very first homicide in many, many, many years. It was a very unfortunate case. It was a murder-suicide in Green Bay. And all these crimes that you see on the left-hand side of the screen are what we call Part 1 crimes. They're the crimes that are being reported to the DOJ and the FBI as reportable crimes. And then the crimes that you see on the right-hand side are the non-reportable crimes. And what we did this year for the first time was actually really try to break down what it is and where they were occurring. And at the bottom here, on the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the theft breakdown. That's what's most important to the residents that we encounter. And there's a perception that I've noticed that bicycle thefts are rampant and auto burglaries are rampant. And not to compare apples and oranges, but 15 minutes south of us in the city of San Francisco in 2017, San Francisco PD took 31,000 auto burglary reports. And having such a high concentration of shopping centers in the town, 125 in perspective is not that bad compared to some of our neighboring agencies just north of us. And you might wonder, well, is 125 a drastic increase from the year prior? It's an increase of 13. So what we're doing is working. Believe it or not, it's a very unfortunate crime to be a victim of, but we are trying. And what we've done, even though there was a small increase, is this last year we conducted several surveillance operations with our detectives and some plainclothes officers in surveilling, looking at the trends of what days these are occurring, and in the hopes of catching these people. As you know, Marin County is a very safe place. People feel that, and a lot of people leave their valuables in plain sight. And these auto burglaries are crimes of opportunity. Close proximity to the freeway, easy targets, shopping centers. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of cars, and these people know it, and they come in, and it takes all of 10 to 15 seconds. And then bike thefts, believe it or not, are not as rampant as some would portray them to be. And with those, the bicycle thefts, we've also done undercover operations where we've had a bait bike. Our detectives have done surveillance. And unfortunately, we haven't caught any in the act of, but we have caught several this last year through excellent investigative work. Top 10 report locations, again, no surprise. It's all surrounding the shopping centers and the high call volumes. And you might wonder, well, most of these are shopping centers or schools. Why is Marin Suites Hotel towards the bottom of it? And that kind of made us a little curious as well, so we looked into it. And what those are, it's a combination of burglary reports, miscellaneous reports, but what we're seeing is the long-term residents at the Marin Suites are reporting these types of crimes. And we did have a little stint last year with one of the residents that we encountered many, many times. So that's an anomaly that normally doesn't happen. Again, the report's taken. Corte Madera, the heat map is, as you would guess it, right around the shopping centers. The very top would be the auto burglaries, and then miscellaneous incident reports could really be anything. Those are just more documentation reports that the officers take. And then, as you can see, theft is prevalent again. Where there's shopping centers, there's theft. That could be a variety of identity thefts to shoplifts. And then another thing I want to mention about the auto burglaries is that in 2015, with the passage of Prop 47, it reduced the penalties for many, many crime types. And one of those happens to be auto burglaries. And so, unfortunately, the criminals know that now versus, spending several months in jail, it's more of a slap on the wrist. Auto burglaries actually are considered misdemeanor crimes now. So it's really empowered suspects and taken away that ability for us to prosecute successfully.
So wait, that means a break-in? If I go up and I break a window, break into the car, steal something, it's a misdemeanor?
Yes.
I'm not. I'm just kind of astounded by it. I didn't realize that. That's
Yeah.
And we voted for it.
There's a variety of crimes. What's shocking to us, when I first got in this business, anybody in possession of cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, that was an automatic arrest, regardless of how much they were in possession of, and it was a felony. Nowadays, with the passage of Prop 47, it's a citation, and they're off on their way. And so it's really made it difficult for us. I mean, we still go out there and do a job, but you just don't get that sense of really making a difference when you give someone a citation and send them on their way. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Lieutenant Menares.
Thank you. I'm going to follow basically the same format that Captain Kalili followed. The slides will be relatively set up the same. This past year this past year we had 3,482 traffic stops compared to last year. It is a small drop in as far as traffic stops are concerned from 2016 to 2017, but it is relatively the same. As far as the percentages, with the pie chart on the bottom, those did remain relatively the same, proportionally sized from 2016 to 2017. And Corte Madera had 1,071 traffic stops, as far as that is concerned. The other stats are as far as the time, there's a timeline stat just talking about the different hours per the day and then as far as the traffic stops by the days of the week. In Corte Madera, the majority of our traffic stops, the top 5 locations came up once again around the shopping centers. You can see with the heat map. You'll also see that Redwood, Warrenham Drive and Redwood High School, kind of the border of Corte Madera, and it is a lot of traffic related to school activity. But also on the bottom is Tamalpais Drive and Highway 101. It's a location issue, and this is where a majority of the traffic stops are called in. It's not that where the violation occurs, it's where the violation, we're able to pull out to a safe location to work traffic, because a lot of times we'll work traffic along Tamalpais Drive and we won't be able to stop it until it's safe to do so, such as the bus pad out by Casa Buena, and that is all encompassed. They call it Tamalpais Drive and Highway 101. So that's why you'll see some of the focus there. But we have stepped up our efforts to with enforcements on Tamalpais Drive, and I think we've actually done a fairly decent job. We're not satisfied with as far as our accident data, which we'll get into here lately, until we're able to sit up here next year and hopefully say, hey, we had none. But we don't think that will happen for a while. As far as our traffic citations versus moving citations, once again, we remained fairly consistent to what we had done in the year past. Corte Madera had 722 citations, as opposed to last year where we had 692. So the citations actually went up. Parking citations and moving citations all combined into one in this area here. We issued 6,500, just above 6,500 citations during the 2017 year, a little bit over 126 citations per week. And the top 5 locations for the parking/moving citations: Tamil Vista Boulevard, 220 Tamil Vista, 45 San Clemente, Madera Boulevard and Tamil Vista Boulevard, and then 200 Tamil Vista Boulevard. You'll see Tamil Vista Boulevard mentioned a lot because it's a smaller travel street, and once again, it's a safer location to make stops. And then the last I have for you is our traffic collision data. It did remain relatively the same to what we did in years past. We had 217 collisions in Corte Madera in the 2017 year. It is a relative to what it was in 2016 as well. We always find it interesting, the highest, everyone would normally think that the weekends are usually going to be our busiest days, but consistently it's during the work week, during the commute times, and you'll see Thursdays was our highest collision totals. And then this is where our collisions occurred. Once again, a majority of our collisions do occur around the shopping centers. Most of our collisions we do have are small little fender benders, not major injury accidents. So the majority of them do happen around shopping centers, are focused around some sort of parking lot. We had 380 total injury accidents and a total of 725 accidents as a group. And then if you look at the locations where the accidents occurred, once again, the heat map is focused on the shopping centers. And that's all I have for you. I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys might have.
Oh, great. Captain Khalili and Lieutenant Maneris, this is great. And Chief Norton, thank you. Questions? Yes.
I'm kind of curious what you're seeing at the high school these days. I noticed that you had quite a number of calls to Redwood.
So if you're talking in relations to collision data or moving citations or citations that I expect?
Well, there were calls. I did notice that Doherty and Pfeiffer was on the top 5 list for collisions, but I can guess what that's about, having a 17-year-old. But in terms of just the overall calls to the high school, I'm kind of curious what that's.
It's pretty consistent with Drake and Redwood. We get a lot of calls out there, but specific to some of the more dynamic threat calls we had earlier, it was kind of unique to Redwood, and we weren't seeing a lot of it. We were getting a lot of media coverage, and you may not follow Sonoma County news, but I live up there, so I've been watching, and actually over the last couple months, they've been having a lot of copycat type things. I don't know if they got their ideas from what happened at Redwood, but a lot of very similar graffiti on the walls, calling in bomb threats. A lot of that's been happening all over the nation since Parkland, but I think there's been at least 3 high schools up in Sonoma County and 1 elementary school in the last couple months where that's happened, and it's also happened a couple times in Tamalpais. So it did seem to be a bit of an anomaly with all that going on, but what we're finding is it's actually pretty common all over right now. Unfortunately, they were just a little ahead of the curve, for lack of a better term.
But beyond that, what types of calls are you getting for Redwood?
We get everything. We get theft. We get a lot of parking calls, they have their own little parking things. We also get, they have the high schools nowadays, they didn't have back in the day, but they have a really robust, what'd you call it, like health and wellness. And we actually get a lot of calls regarding depressed students, possibly suicidal, and it's actually great. They call us a lot more than they used to on those matters, and only on the very serious cases, but it gives us a chance to intercede and assist with getting those students help before hopefully they hurt themselves. But that's about it. Less fights than I would say 10 years ago, a lot less. When we first started, the 3 of us, we were a couple times a week, we were breaking up major fights. It was kind of what happened, and honestly, 1 a month maybe? I mean, it's pretty rare. There's physical violence, other than the strange thing is, I don't know if this is true everywhere or just in where we live, but it seems to be less smaller altercations, but unfortunately more frequent big altercations, like the high school shootings. And if you weren't following the news this afternoon, there was another workplace shooting down at YouTube in San Bruno today. So I don't know what's causing that, but that's basically what we're seeing.
Okay, thank you.
Up here, I have a question. I find it disturbing that the punishments of so many crimes have been reduced to where there's no deterrent anymore for the crimes. Is there any movement of legislation coming back to kind of reverse that or modify what was already passed that relaxed the
Those were mainly propositions passed forward by the state's voters. But I have heard, you may know better than I do, I have heard like the League of California Cities was speaking up and kind of taking a stand and trying to reverse some of that, but that's about it. I mean, law enforcement and the Cal Chiefs Association, we're always saying, hey, that was a mistake. It's causing a lot of problems. But it's not just the penalties. It was the prison overcrowding bill, pushing people.
Right.
There's a lot of factors. And there's even just legal liability has changed, where when we started, we would chase people all over, in pursuits for small felonies. And now, pretty much across the nation, everyone's changed their pursuit laws and things like that because of lawsuits and people getting hurt and things like that. So it's a combination of factors.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate and hard to do your job.
More challenging.
Yeah, I'll say. Are there any questions from our audience this evening? Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll move on to the consent calendar. And the purpose of the consent calendar is to group items that are routine or have already been discussed and may not require further discussion. And they can be approved by a single motion, or anyone may pull any of these items, whether it be staff or members of our audience or the council itself to discuss these issues further. If we have none to pull, could I have a motion, please?
I'll move to approve 4.1.1 through 4.1.3.
Second?
Councilmember Andrews?
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey? Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor First?
Yes.
Mayor Condon?
Yes. Okay, and then we will move on to our town business items. And the first one is to approve Resolution 16/2018, approving fiscal year 2018-19 SB1 project list and funding of gas tax expenditures. And we will have a report from our Public Works, Peter Brown.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I like brief reports. This one's only a page. And I think it's pretty straightforward. We do this annually. It's required by SB1 that we submit to Senate Bill 1, that we submit to the California Transportation Commission our projected use of funds for our allocation. And as you'll note, in the staff report, we kind of go over, what what we think those projects are going to be. And I think that, the Tamil Vista Complete Streets project is one that we'd like to see eligible, and that's one that you'll notice we have a lot of issues in terms of circulation and transportation safety. So I don't really have any other comments other than to note that the total amounts for the past year was around $260,000, and the next year is going to be $406,000. So those are, monies that we get from the state, and we'll use them for streets and roads improvements.
Great, thank you. Any questions for staff? Yes, Jim?
I don't object to any of the things listed here, but Casa Buena, when are we going to be able to get sidewalks so folks can walk from the apartments and condos at one end and connect to the shopping centers and so on? 'Cause
Councilmember Andrews, I find that's a common question since I started working here over the past few months. The answer to that question is likely not in this next year or two. The main reason is it's over a $2 million project, and we don't have construction funds. We do have design funds, and we're moving to complete 100% design. I'll bring that to council for your review when we have a cost estimate for that project. We have issues with Caltrans right-of-way. We are looking to solve some of those issues because, as most of you know, the east side of the roadway is right up against the Caltrans right-of-way and a steep embankment down to 101. And so fitting in bike lanes and sidewalk in that is what I would call technically challenging. I guess the best thing to do is in the next few months when we have those construction drawings complete, I can bring those back to you for your review and input. And if you want to go ahead and spend local funds on that type of project in that $2 to $3 million range, we typically don't do 100% local funds because that's a big chunk of our available expenditures. We would try to seek grant money for a portion of that. Just give me a few more months to finish those the design, and I can come back and get your direction on expenditure for construction.
okay.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Anyone from our audience have any questions with this? Okay, we'll close it to the public and bring it back. Diane?
I just want to make one quick comment about Casa Buena. I just want you to remember that belonged to the county. So they're the ones that are responsible for making that roadway too narrow for us to be able to easily fit in the sidewalks. Not that it's an excuse, but hey, I'll put off the blame if I can.
Right, I'm just freaked out because before I was on council, I was over there campaigning and I watched a mom pushing a baby carriage with two toddlers sort of hanging on to her, walking in the middle of the street. At the same time, a certain restaurant's lunch hour crowd was taking off. And I'm just sitting there waiting for us to lose a family one day.
Oh,
And
I
so,
get it.
I should
I get it. So I'm glad we are moving forward on that.
Okay.
I will move to approve resolution number 16/2018, adopting the fiscal year 2018-19 SB1 project list and funding of gas tax expenditures per Senate Bill 1.
Second.
Councilmember Andrews?
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey? Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor First?
Yes.
Mayor Condon?
Yes. Okay, and then moving right along. We need to appoint council members to serve as commissioner and alternate commissioner to the TAM board. And Rebecca, do you have a report for that?
I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. Just to summarize my report, we received email communications from TAM notifying us that the current appointments of Mayor Condon and Vice Mayor First to the TAM board are expiring at the end of April, which is not contiguous with the expiration of your council seats, unfortunately, but they asked that we review the appointments and provide new appointments if possible, with several options as noted in the staff report. And I recommend that you revisit the appointments and consider possibly extending the appointment of Vice Mayor First through the end of her current term. And I did let Tam know that we are experiencing June council elections for the first time, and the reorganization of the council may take place at the first meeting in July, but the appointments of new council members to these various vacancies and other appointments that we appoint council members to serve on might not take place until the beginning of August. And they directed us to make sure that we get appointments to them so that we don't lose the ability to have representation on the TAM board at their June, July, and August meetings.
Okay, what I'd like to suggest with that is that perhaps Diane, if you would stay on, and then I will remove myself from that and leave that spot open to someone continuing on the council so that there's not a period of time where we don't have representation.
Thank you.
Yes.
Well, if nobody eagerly wants the position of TAM rep, I'm happy to stay on through June. But I'm kind of curious about when in June, because the election is in early June. We have our first council meeting probably either the day before or the day of the election, depending. Usually we
The day
move it up
before.
one day before, the 4th. Second council meeting will probably be June 19th.
Correct. And I don't believe we will be able to certify the votes of the election. I think the county anticipates having the results of the election certified toward the end of the third week, beginning of the fourth week in June.
Okay, that was my question.
So we wouldn't be able to certify the results of the election until the July 3rd council meeting, at which point we would celebrate our outgoing council members and install new council members.
Okay, so I'd technically be a council member through June 30th?
Correct.
And then, okay, thank you.
Okay?
Or just,
I'm trying to plan some
are we
vacation.
getting ahead of ourselves? Shouldn't we have public comment?
Yeah, after, if there's any questions
Oh,
about
okay.
this.
I thought we skipped over questions.
When-
Okay.
What day of the week and what time of the day do the TAM meetings usually occur?
It is is it the 4th or the fourth Thursday of the month at 7 PM at the Civic Center.
Are we planning to have a June 3rd meeting? A July 3rd, excuse me.
Wait, what?
I recommend that we cancel that.
Okay,
That is coming.
so it would,
Oh, we changed
It would
that.
be,
yeah, so it would be then
or
the,
do we not?
No, we were going to cancel the July 17th meeting. Unless you changed your mind.
yeah, I think it's probably, I would recommend canceling just because of the nature with 4th of July and everything, to cancel the 3rd.
But who's going to be in the card for the parade?
That's-
That was the other reason why we
That
were
was, yeah,
going
that
to do
was
that.
another issue. But,
I'd suggest we just get a bigger car and we overlap.
well, and actually, I will tell you that the executive director of the chamber said they could
We've already spoken.
do outgoing and incoming. And so.
Party car?
So, anyway.
I need a
two
party bu-
cars,
party bus?
2 cars. But, so I think that that's, that's okay. So, I don't know what if staff, Rebecca and Todd, if you want to figure that out.
We will. I would just recommend that the appointment just go through June 30th of 18. That's the date we should focus on.
Okay. The TAM board meeting is scheduled for, the June TAM board meeting is scheduled for June 28th.
Okay. Any questions, comments from our public? Seeing none, I'll close it to the public, bring it back to council.
Yeah. I move that we make Sloan the alternate.
I'll step in as the alternate if the town titan of transportation will continue through June 30th.
Well, I think the issue was having the alternate be someone who will be able to serve through August in case there's.
I'm aware that,
Okay.
yeah, I might not be here.
Right.
So
Yeah, that,
so if you want to do it with Sloan, then that's fine.
but then again, he might not do it.
You might not do it. So then it would have to be you.
We can always make a new appointment in July if, that happens.
Put that as an item to discuss early in July
Sure.
as part of the reorg.
There is a chance I might need the alternate to fill in for June 28th.
Okay.
Okay, so
You willing to
Do
do
we-
it?
Yeah. Do you
Sure.
want to do it? Okay, good.
Unless you want it, Jim?
No, it's,
I think
okay.
I'm
Are you here, Bob?
out of town that week.
okay, I guess.
Jim,
Positive. I'm definitely out of town that week.
congratulations.
Yeah. I'll draw
Just
the
talked
black
yourself into
bead.
it.
Yeah, I know. It's just,
Okay, so.
Should we
it'll
take a
be-
vote? Do we need
Okay,
to
it'll
vote?
be, do we need to vote this? It's for
Yes.
Diane for the
I'll be the private.
first position and Jim Andrews for alternate.
Thank you. And would the timeframe just be through potentially the end of August until we reorganize and revisit council member appointments?
yes.
Councilmember Andrews,
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey, Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor First,
Yes.
Mayor Condon.
Yes. Okay, thank you all. Next item on the agenda is a proclamation in support of Fair Housing Month. Do you want me to, or do you want to go
I
ahead?
can just briefly summarize. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. This is a request that we receive annually in March to proclaim April as being Fair Housing Month. And the difference is this year, in addition to celebrating April as Fair Housing Month, we were also requested to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act. And that is what is up for consideration.
Yeah, and the reason I brought it to the council was that in some years past, some of the council members objected to the language of the proclamation. And so anyway, this is different. It's revised. So at any rate, I just wanted it to be a decision of the council. Does anybody have any input from the audience? Okay, we'll close to public comment, bring it back.
I'll move to proclaim April 2018 as Fair Housing Month.
Second?
Councilmember Andrews,
Aye.
Councilmember Bailey, Councilmember Ravazio,
Yes.
Vice Mayor First,
Yes.
Mayor Condon.
Yes. Okey doke, and then moving right along, I don't want to skip council member reports here. Okay. We don't have any business for the sanitary district this time, so we'll go to our council and town manager reports. Mr. Cusimano.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Just a few updates. First, I just want to commend our Public Works Director and his staff for their recruitment and the interviewing process for 2 new engineering positions that we're looking for. I was lucky enough to sit in on the last round of interviews, and we have a really good problem on our hands. We have 4 really quality candidates, and so we're working on the final rankings now, hoping to make job offers next week. But just really impressive group, and I commend Peter on that recruitment process. We had the first sales tax forum on Saturday. It went well, but we did compete with Easter, so we're hoping again this Wednesday at 6 o'clock at the community center will be our second sales tax forum on Measure F, and so I hope as many people as possible can attend that. Adam, our planning and building director, and myself will be meeting with the Audubon Society tomorrow morning, and so we will begin and we'll be continuing our discussions with the fence issue as well as the berm. We did receive a letter from the Corte Madera Community Foundation voicing their concerns, and we plan on sharing those concerns with the Audubon Society tomorrow as well. And I think that's it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council member reports. Diane, do you want to be first?
Sure, I have nothing to report.
Are you sure?
I went to a bunch of meetings, but there was nothing really, it's just the regular stuff.
Okay. Jim?
Nothing to report.
Nothing
No,
to
maybe it's
report?
lame duck-itis.
I got a couple things. We had a homeless committee meeting, I don't know, last week, I think. And we unanimously approved recommending to the councils of all 11 cities that we continue funding as a group the same program that we began funding 3 years ago. So this is the first time that all 11 cities in Marin County have gotten together and are actually funding the same effort, because we really don't have the funds to do it on our own. So we're recommending that we're going to continue that for 3 more years, so that's going to be coming up before all of us as a budget proposal. And we are recommending that we use it to fund the mobile shower program. And I've asked Todd to try to get it on one of the next 2 agendas. We have a presentation from the people who do that. It'll be about 7 to 10 minutes, very informative. But the whole principle and the reason we really want to go with the mobile shower program, it's this whole principle of coordinated entry where we can engage people, engage them in services, and hopefully actually get something done. So far, the program has been successful. The whole coordinated entry, I don't want to get too complex here, but which is a much larger program, but in the last 6 months, they have actually moved 25 people into permanent housing in Marin County, which is great. So that's real progress, and there's actually now housing available to move people into. They just have to get them engaged and into services so they can get them into housing. So making some progress on that front. On the coalition connection, there is a lot of stuff going on, but just the one thing I want to call everybody's attention to, Ben Court, who is a nationally known speaker, is going to talk about the truth about, it's entitled The Truth About Cannabis Legalization, and it's going to be April 16th at the Raffel Theater at 6 p.m., and it's going to be a really, really good, he's a very, very compelling speaker. He's done TED Talks, things like that. So I encourage everyone to go to that. Thank you.
Do you mind if I mention something that's sort of coalition connected? I don't know if you guys talk about nicotine at all, but there was a really great article yesterday or the day before in the New York Times about how the nicotine vaping pens are just exploding on high school campuses. Anyway, it's a very, very informative article, and I've heard that even Redwood, at Redwood, they find a lot of the little spent cartridges in the parking lot.
We talk about it a lot because those same pens are also used for cannabis, cannabis oil, and we're doing a lot of education with parents and have been for the past 6 months because most people have no idea what they are. They look like a thumb drive, right? And they have no idea that it's actually something that's used for vaping. So we're doing a lot of education with parent groups right now on that to try to increase awareness on that. We're talking about some other programs as it relates to drug use with those. Because, I mean, people literally are lighting, using them in classrooms because they don't create any smoke, and nobody knows that it's happening if they're not paying attention. So.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. I just want to report that our age-friendly intergenerational center is just becoming a real thing. And we're set to have our grand opening sneak preview for everyone to see this new space. That's going to be on Sunday, April 29th from 2 to 4. There'll be a little entertainment, there'll be some snacks, and to see what an incredible job, a real transformation that we've been making to transform a space into something that I think is going to really be of tremendous value to everyone of all ages. And I want to especially thank Todd, who has put up with me through all of this, and Peter, who also has put up with this, and all of the council. And Diane, thank you too for your stuff on the side that you've been doing. I'm just so pleased with it. On the back, I put out a few of the schedule of programs that are going to be available starting the day after our sneak preview, right on Monday the 30th. Programs begin, and Mario is already in the process of assigning the courses numbers. We will have a lot of different avenues in which people can enroll for these. The one goal of ours is, and I've mentioned this before, was that we'd established Age-Friendly Solutions, which is a 501c3 organization, and we have been getting donations and hope to continue getting these donations, and they are expressly in the formation of the 501c3. They are to be used exclusively to benefit the intergenerational center. So at least for the first few months, these programs, if you buy a gold pass, which is a $15 donation, okay, just a $15 donation from Corte Madera residents, you get your little gold pass, and you can use that and be admitted free to any and all of the programs for the rest of 2018. If you live outside of Corte Madera, then you get a silver pass. And for that, it's a $25 donation, or you are invited to donate more if you'd like. And we do hope that people will join in the spirit of donating for this worthy cause. And then they will be able to come to all the classes that are going to be given throughout the year. We've got tremendous amount of things going on. And just lastly, I want to say, which I find very exciting, is that we've been speaking to teens, how we can get teenagers to really use the intergenerational space. For years, ever since I've been sitting here, it always comes to the council, there's nothing for the teens. And they said, we need a makerspace. So I quickly went home and Googled what a makerspace was. And since then, we've been promised, always seeing is believing, but that we would be able to raise enough money that we would be able to get not only the 3D printer, which we've already budgeted for, but also for a laser cutter. And so we will have our own little makerspace there. And that would, I'm sure, be of interest not only to the teens, but to adults as well. And so it's a perfect theme for really satisfying the need of an intergenerational center. And I think it's just going to be tremendous. So I hope that all of you will come and show your support on April 29th. And if you have time, sign up for a class. They're essentially drop-in classes. So if you can't make one, then you just come to another. But at any rate, I'm very excited about it. And believe it or not, it's going to be ready for the grand opening, if not before. So anyways, I'm really happy about that. So moving on, unless there are any questions from our public. The draft of the upcoming agenda items for April 17th. If you want to look that over and see if there's anything to add.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, just quickly, to Councilmember Rabazio's point, I did invite, at his request, a presentation of the mobile showers, either this upcoming meeting or the meeting after. So depending on their availability, I will put that on the agenda. And tied to that, Dario will follow up with just a preliminary discussion of some council discretion on various programs, and this will be one of them. It's about $15,000 annually, and so we will just have a quick discussion to get some direction from the council so we can put that into the upcoming budget.
Okay, great. Thank
And then it looks like also we're going to move the lateral ordinance back a meeting or two, and so you'll see as a public hearing, the primary discussion for this council meeting will be in an appeal. And I'll just say that the view ordinance would not have saved us from this appeal, so.
Okay.
Just want that on the record.
Okay, and just if we can add to that, on April 13th, I will be attending the League of California Cities Conference in Pomona, so I would like to give a report on that. Okay. Anything else tonight? Well, seeing nothing else then, I think it's time to adjourn. Okay, thank you all for coming, and have a great rest of the week.